Welcome back. Today's guest, I'm very excited because it's been a long time since we have caught up. Today, I'm speaking with Svein Tuft. Welcome, Svein.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a while, but nice
It's been a
to
while.
get back in touch and get a good catch up.
For anyone that doesn't know Svein is a Canadian cyclist and he's got a fascinating story. And I love stories, which is why I wanted to get him on board to chat about what's been happening since we last met, or were planning supposed to meet, because we were supposed to be doing a couple of camps in Girona in 2020 just before lockdown and COVID hit, and they all got cancelled. So I know there's been a lot of things happening since then, but particularly the book. You've got a book coming out, which sounds like a really cool story. Lots of stories in there.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting time. I was setting up in Andorra to basically run like a gravel touring and training camp kind of setup operation in the Catalonia region of Spain as well. And that's what I was really enjoying in that part of my life, is kind of being like-minded people out and teaching, or at least like passing on the things that I learned throughout a career of racing. And I think I always came from a different perspective, in the sense of I always look at the different angles. Like a lot of people, training is not really their issue. A lot of people I notice that they're very highly motivated.
Yeah.
And quite often that's kind of biting them in the ass, because they're so motivated. They're doing too much, in my opinion. And I was around guys who are racing in the World Tour, and they can do that because they have nothing else going on.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they train super hard and recover. But I was watching guys like, trying to do the same training, same, like, okay, they could never do the same volume, but they're always doing like this high intensity stuff. And you would run into these people and they're just burnt out. They have family, they have work, and then they're trying to like train in this insane approach. And so,
but the secret training behind the scenes as well. Like they got the prescribed training by the coach, plus the extra 20-30% that they're sort of doing
absolutely
behind the scenes.
And you're just like, how's that been working out for you? And their mentality always was like, well, maybe I'm just weak, maybe I need to train more. And this kind of like, they're hard on themselves. And I'm just like, it was hard to watch. So anyways, it was fun to be part of those groups and try and pass on like a different approach, because what I saw in my career was that it's very easy to go chasing off after all those like 1% and live like a maniac, and you're just crushing yourself. And I saw that a lot of people weren't enjoying this really beautiful life that they got. Like, racing, it can be hell or beautiful. And I kind of saw this angle as like, I don't want to trade everything for what? Like what? Like what's the end goal here? And so I was lucky where I started looking at things differently throughout my career, and just going like, well, when I'm retired, I don't want to be totally buckled and hating the sport and my body's broken, So I just started focusing on those other things, and then trying to pass on those kinds of ideas to people, which is a hard sell, because it's also not what those people want to hear. And maybe you deal with that quite often. Like sometimes the thing they need is the least sexy option compared to what's out there on social media. Yeah, it's so boring. It's like, it's consistency and work and dedication to a thing over time. And it's like, sorry, but that's kind of the recipe. There's no tricks and special supplement or, training technique that's going to get you there quicker. That's just the cold reality. So I saw that a lot. And so it really prompted me so why am I saying all that? It's because that's the direction I wanted to go. I want to help people kind of understand that about ourselves, because we all are kind of wired that way. Once you start excelling at a sport, you just want more and get better, and it becomes a bit of an addiction. And you need to have someone around you who has at least been down those rabbit holes or those pitfalls or those things that can really, like, I mean, sometimes recovery from those, if you go very deep, it can be 6 months. And I'm sure you see that, or longer in the nutrition world. Yeah. And it blows my mind.
Ruin, like, I've seen it ruin careers if people haven't been looking after their bodies appropriately.
Absolutely. I think when you're dealing with athletes, you're dealing with a pretty resilient, robust person. Like, I think if we're talking World Tour athlete, or like at that very high level, but then the people who have been doing that same habitual treatment to their body and mind for the last 20 years, and then working on top of that, like with that same mentality, and then raising a family and all that stuff. So yeah, you could see how it could take years to bounce back. And that's also something some people don't want to hear about. And it's crazy because
It's that cultural message of like, it's got to be hard.
yeah,
If it's no
yeah,
pain, then there's no gain. And that's why I've always loved your approach of the whole like working smarter, not harder. And
yes.
which was I guess one of the first camps that we were working with together in Besalú. I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2019, one of those years, but it was a cycling camp, but there was no cycling. And I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Is I know as soon as you bring the bikes out, it's like it's the same stuff everyone's been doing, and they get
Yeah.
caught up in the kind of weird. They're eyeing it up everyone else, and it's just this whole kind of stress related, high cortisol, high adrenaline, and just so you bring people out of that typical, their usual, what they're used to, and kind of show them another side, and show that it's really important. Like, because when you're young, you don't know, like you just think you can keep smashing yourself forever, and because the body is resilient, it keeps giving back, it keeps recovering. But when you hit a certain age, that starts to change.
Yeah.
And then if you don't listen to any of the cues or messages, it hits you really hard, like later on when you're 40. So, I just wanted to pull people out of that kind of same mentality. Oh, we're going to go smash it for like 6 hours. It's going to be an epic loop, which I'm not saying there's no time for. Like, you got to work hard on the bike. You want to be fast as a biker, whatever you're trying to do, you got to work hard. There's no question about that. But I think that you have to respect so many other facets of what's going on in your body, whether it's through nutrition, whether it's just through how you approach your day, right? Like I saw so many people had such a stressful connection to their training. And even that, like even at the world tour level, the guys were just like, I would look at it and just be like, what's the point then? Like, this looks like hell. This does not look fun to me. They're talking about this 5x5 minute thing and they got to reach this number. And I'm just like, who cares though? Like, you either can or you can't today, but that's just today. You've been awesome in the past. You're going to be awesome in the future. Why are you obsessing about what happens today? Because it could be an awesome day or not, but that shouldn't change your whole like outlook and the way you view yourself. And I saw so many people come home crushed because the workout didn't go like they had in their head, but it was also the anxiety and the stress prior to that about the thing. And I'm just like, because if you're there and you've had success as a racer, it's going to come so many times. Like, again, if we're like, I think nutrition is such a great topic about this kind of thing, because I always thought, like, once I started really delving into it, I tried everything, because I was part of that whole, going from low carb to, like I was doing like keto. I was dabbling with keto in like 2009, 2010.
Like everybody.
Yeah. And
they still are.
Of course. And while I like don't think that's the greatest thing for a cyclist, I think it's important to dabble a bit and see what that feels like, what that is, and and I think there's actually a time and a place for it sometimes.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. I think I remember when we first met, because we were introduced through Christian Meyer introduced us. For me, he wanted me to come and help you with the food and the nutrition. And so we met up at the coffee shop and we had a chat about different bits and pieces, and we were talking about the types of foods you like eating. And then you're like, there's the racing nutrition, and then there's the nutrition that I do when I'm out in the middle of nowhere for like 5-10 days, and I'm just foraging and grabbing stuff from like whatever I find along the route. And the different type of training you're doing determines a different type of fuel source for that, which is where there's a time and a place where you want those fast carbs for racing 100%, but then if you're doing that more steady, long, multiple days, there's a place for more fats in that to fuel that more steady, slower intensity.
100%. Yeah. And so that metabolic flexibility, I think, is such an important one, right? Not just obsessing about one kind of doctrine, right? Which you also see now is like, high carb, that's changed the sport for sure. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the technology through nutrition, the basically the bioavailability of high carbohydrate,
Yeah.
it has really put a turbo on most riders, right? And that's what we're
Oh,
seeing in the sport.
and
Like,
the training quality and the recovery and like what you were saying before, like some of that anxiety that people have with the training. I've seen like when people start fueling their training well and those sessions that they previously were like stressed about and anxious, they're like, oh, I didn't realize it didn't have to be so hard. I'm like,
yeah.
if you've got the right fuel, like yes, it's going to be
Oh,
physically hard, but it's not going to destroy you like it did in the past.
100%. I think of how many times, and I know a lot of my friends from that era, we were just sabotaging ourselves,
Yeah.
because that was just part of the narrative at that time, was that, eating was kind of like a weakness almost.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's weird to say, but that was the reality. Whereas like now they're just cramming like 120 grams.
Yeah.
In those days, it was kind of like, well, you went out and rode like 5 or 6 hours. And if like you brought a big
Yeah.
sack of food, everyone was looking at you like a
Ugh, what's wrong
total
with you?
weirdo. Yeah. Like, what's
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
gotta, it's like something was wrong with you because you wanted to eat, and that's so strange to think of now. And it was
Well, it's,
funny,
and it
like,
shifted really. It's really fast that it shifted. I mean, it's fast when it's slow because the research that's shown that fuel for the speed is not new. It's old. It's like 20 years
yeah,
old. The
yeah, yeah,
performance, but it's the application. And I feel like, at least in my experience working in pro cycling, it's really only been in the last 5 years that people actually starting to listen. Whereas, yeah,
yeah,
2018, 2019 riders were like 80, aiming for like 80 grams an hour if at a push. And now, as you say, it's
yeah,
like 100, and they're performing so much better. They're getting leaner, they're getting stronger, and they don't want to go back because once
yeah,
you've seen it, you're like,
yeah.
it's
It's wild,
magic.
isn't it? Like, it's just like you said, as soon as they see it, but
Yeah.
that's how cycling has always been, right? It's so hard to shift. It's so
Yeah.
traditional and it's so stuck in like, well, this is the way it's always worked.
Mm.
How do you like, so unless like a few big names kind of buy into it or people find out that that's kind of what they've been doing,
Yeah.
it doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I also find the opposite of that with, we'll say, like people that are training for, so going back into that metabolic flexibility and context of training
Mm.
and nutrition. I think it's so important to have that context, because then I also see people are like, well, Wout van Aert he's in like Flanders and he's smashing 120 grams of carbs an hour. That's what I need to be doing, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, but those are
Time and
very different
place.
things. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the
Time and
context of
place.
what that is, it's like, look at your training and like, so what Wout can put out kilojoules per hour and your kilojoules per hour. It's not like that's just the cold reality of life.
Yeah.
Like that guy is a genetic anomaly, right? And he's also in a race that's cold, it's stressful. There's a million other
Yeah.
things going on, right? So
You don't want your
yes,
hand in your pocket to getting a bar out and risk a collarbone and
yeah, and that's just it too. So like, should you be eating gels and liquid calories at that amount for your training?
Mm.
So it's like trying to find that sweet spot, because everything in life is on this kind of pendulum, and like, so now everyone's rushing to this high carb diet and all that kind of stuff, which I think is in general, like because I work with athletes, and you know one of the things I'm always trying to do is get them to eat more,
Yeah.
but
Same.
not at that level, right? And so
Yeah.
like my whole thing, and what I saw is like through that starvation training that we would do, it was just part of it's just what you did, like even at training camps, like guys would just, you'd have a few bottles of water and you would go out for these 5 or 6 hour rides, and like pretty solid pace, like you're cruising through the mountains. I mean,
And
I
then you
look
get
back
home
at
and you
that.
like go to bed. Spend
Yeah,
the
I
rest
was
of the
just
day in
like,
bed.
how did we like come out of that strong? And so there is an aspect that you have to kind of do hard things and sometimes put the body through big stressors to adapt, for sure. But it seemed like that's all we were doing, right? And so there's a lifespan to that where you you sometimes have to just like, you will be governed, you will be shut down, your body will just say no more, can't. And so then
Yeah.
you get into this kind of swing state of like, you're fucked, and then you have to eat a bunch of food to feel normal again.
Yeah.
And so my whole point of view, and I'm sure you're, I know we're on the same page there, is like eat more on the ride, eat more when you're training a lot, so you
Yeah.
don't have to pay on the backside when your body's going to do all of the wrong things with that food and choose
Oh,
all of the wrong
100%.
things as far as
Well,
decisions go, right?
I find when you get more food, you eat more on the bike, your
Yep.
appetite afterwards is normalized. And so people, I think, often are stressing about like their addiction to sugar or sugar cravings and like the aftermath of, which is really, it's like just your body trying to recover and craving what it needed
Yeah.
hours earlier. And I find that, yeah, like you get more of that food in training before, during, and after. You're being like proactive rather than reactive, and then the rest of the day you're like, okay, cool, like have my normal lunch, have my normal dinner, and I'm like, okay, well, off we go, versus be like, when is dinner, Cookie Monster, and all the attacks that it comes in.
100%. Yeah, like, I've been training a fair amount this summer, doing like just bike packing races and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
I've implemented a totally different style than what I was used to. But exactly that, I'd come home from a big ride. And I think I always ate more than most cyclists because I was always just bigger and whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wasn't going to trade my health for like a few results, which is questionable whether I'd ever attain that. The point being is that just like you said, I would do these big days for me now, and I come home and I like when I took care of the nutrition properly, I come home and I feel normal. I'm not like I would have like whatever your like recovery, whatever you eat for lunch or whatever. And then I'm like good to go for the rest of the day. Good energy. I'm not like looking at every little thing going like, oh yeah, maybe I should have some of that,
And then you
Whereas
can be present with your family and stuff as well.
100%.
I find that that's one of the performance elements I've been talking about, especially with my amateur or like sort of sub-elite people who've got full-time jobs and families.
Yeah.
And in the past, or even that some of my pro athletes were in the past, they go on their long training sessions, they get back and that's it, they're done for the day, nothing, lights out.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
when they get that fueling in, they're able to then be present with their family. They could be like, oh, actually, no, I've got a bit of energy. I can go for a walk down to the block versus like, nope, I can only ride or nothing.
Yeah, totally. Like the brain still works. And,
Yeah.
when you have kids, it's like you got to be switched on. They don't care how you trained or
it's 5
if
o'clock
you're
in the
tired.
morning. Like, you're getting up now. I'm awake.
Yeah.
Wake up.
So it's such an important one. And I think finding that balance of like nutrition on the bike is huge. And I think it's a game changer for anyone, that takes the sport seriously or any sport seriously, right? And has to juggle all that time and family and work and all that kind of thing.
I'm curious to hear what you were doing differently on the bikepacking now. Was it more just the amounts or the types of foods that you're eating that you're doing differently compared to in the past?
Yeah, it was really kind of, I have a friend up here that I work with and he's got the full metabolic cart, and he started just delving into my physiology just as like a little fun side project. And I had a few objectives this year, like this BC Epic 1000K, just like gravel kind of trail bike race. And, I'm like, well, nutrition's the biggest aspect of something like that, right? If you crock that up, you're going to pay, and it takes ages to come back to get to like optimal, essentially it's power output over time, right? So I really started like playing around and doing a few of these tests and finding out, you look at your fat max. Everyone talks about fat max. It's it's a good number to kind of understand, but then I wanted to see like from the beginning of the season my fat carb crossover point. And that was interesting because that changed for me like in 3 months by like 50 watts. So then I was like, oh, okay, this is cool, because you're seeing like you're playing around with nutrition, you're playing around with diet, and then also your training is just changing that a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so then the real emphasis was, again, how do I, because I also don't want to eat garbage. I don't want to buy $5 gels, There was a day when I could just go into the truck and take boxes and boxes home. Not that I would want to, but like,
when you start fueling your rides well, you start to realize like, oh, I could spend $300 a week on my nutrition if I'm not careful here.
Yeah, it's insane, and good for them. They've got the run on the market with these crazy like, and I'm not going to lie, like a Morton gel or whatever, like they're incredible. Like there's a lot of calories in something that doesn't seem like anything, just kind of goes down. So I wanted to fuel with real food from home. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, how do you do that too, right? So then my wife is pretty awesome. We started looking into different recipes for bars and just started making these super calorie dense kind of like oat nut kind of, yeah, like chocolate chip bars, like this, like calorie bombs basically. And then
But
I would just
tasty.
make tasty is like, yeah, like I
You're
like
like, oh,
to
I
give
can't wait to eat this. This is going to be
a point of
amazing.
reference. A point of reference is like you're 40 hours into a bike packing race. You haven't slept. You've been essentially just eating that, and you still like the taste of it. That's pretty special, because
That's
a lot of
very
times
special.
you lose you lose all like interest in any kind of like taste, or like even then like something sweet, your taste buds are kind of shot at that point. So
Yeah, that flavor fatigue.
exactly, yeah. So then I would also make like these sourdough sandwiches, just pack them in my bags, and I would just stay on a schedule and eat like, so initially, like always in the first 2 hours, I'm never that hungry, right? You're kind of burning through that stored glycogen and that. So back in the day, I would always never eat in the first 2 hours just to burn through that. And I also changed that. I would just be like, well, it's a big day. So you're not going to, that's not going to help you. Like
If you're on
like
empty.
burning through your glycogen and then starting to eat, then it's too late, as you've probably said a million times. So then I started using some of the more high calorie drink mixes. So just to start getting carbohydrate in right away if it's a big day. Like if you're just going on a cruisy 2 hour ride, you don't need to eat, in general, unless you have something the next day or context again.
It's always like context. It's like, it depends.
Exactly. Which gets tricky for people.
It's the most hated word. I'm gonna have to do a podcast just about depends.
Yeah, totally. So then I would just started sticking on schedule and just stick, like, I know roughly, you don't have to get crazy about the calories, but like if you know roughly what something is, then you just make sure you stay on that schedule, and per hour kilojoules burn. So you just kind of find that sweet spot for you. What are you doing? What's the intensity? And how long do you expect to go at that rate?
Yeah.
And you start piecing that together, and it's like, okay, now it becomes just very simple.
Yeah.
I have like, it's annoying, but I set an alarm on my Garmin. Like, I can't believe I'm a like a retired, bike racer from, for many years. And here I am as a 47-year-old man. I got a little alarm on my computer telling me when to eat, But in those moments, like,
it's so useful. It's so, because you get distracted, you get excited.
Yeah.
There's like lots of things that can take your attention, and then all of a sudden you haven't eaten in an hour, and then you're bonking and you're flatlining, and you're like, oh.
Well, I think that's such a great point, because what happens is like you don't realize time unless it's kind of shown to you, and when you are caught up, like if I do these bike packing races, like hours can go by, like where I would probably not eat sometimes, because that's kind of the way I was wired.
If you don't have that appetite signal, that cue, and because some people are hungry. Same goes with thirst. Like some people are really thirsty, they'll drink through all their water, their drinks, without trying. And other people, like, they come back with a full bottle, and you're like, how did you go for that 4 hours and drink nothing? And so again, like having these little prompts and reminders, they're just so valuable to support your goals and what your personality, your structure is like.
Totally. Yeah. And it's a game changer. You don't realize how quickly like 20, 30 minutes goes by. Right. And it's like telling you again to eat, drink. And just like you said, I'll do these, I have people come and stay. We have a cabin on our property that we've remodeled, and people come and stay and do gravel rides, and we'll go do like 4 hours in the heat. And I'm just like you said, I'll look down and we're 2 hours in, and the guy's drinking like a quarter of his like of his 2 bottles. And I'm like, hey man, like you got to start drinking. Like we've still got like another 1,000-meter climb, just after this corner here, and you've barely. Oh yeah, no, that's kind of how. And I'm like, wow, because at the same time they'll be telling you how their training's kind of topped out, and they feel like they plateaued, and they feel like burnt out all the time. I'm like, well, if you're drinking half a bottle on a 4-hour ride, I'm sorry, but there's no human that's going to feel awesome after that, right? Like,
I
come,
mean, I see it
yeah,
all
I've
the
got these
time. Like people
headaches.
spend so much energy and money and time on like the newest gear or helmets or
Yeah,
shoes to be seconds quick. And I'm like, with nutrition, that can make you minutes, if not hours faster, depending on
hours.
the distance. And like especially like the ultra long distance, that could be days if it's a multiple day event that you if you're able to recover and back on the bike, bounce back without having to really wind yourself up to get going again the next day.
Yeah, I find it so crazy having come from that era that I think just disrespected that stuff, or didn't
Yeah.
disrespect it. Was just more of like a hard man's mentality.
Yeah.
I think it hindered us so much.
Mm.
I look at, like, I almost have these moments now where I'm out there and I'm just like, boy, you're 7 hours in and you feel awesome. It's
Yeah.
just because all you've done is taken care of your nutrition. Yeah,
Yeah.
you train, yeah, you do all that stuff, but like, I think of so many times when I'd be in those like hard, long days in the Giro or whatever, and you just tapped. And like,
Yeah.
I would think back to it and I was like, I was barely eating, barely
Yeah.
drinking, you know?
Yeah.
Unless it was
I've had
hot.
so many,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I've had so many races and riders been like, my career could have been so different if I'd
yeah,
met you and known this years ago, and
yeah,
that regret, and they're like, oh, yeah,
yeah. And like I said, I think I actually ate a lot more than the average guy,
yeah,
but still it was not enough. And in the right context for the right time, right? It would kind of go in
yeah.
these ebbs and flows, like I said, because your body, if you don't allow it to, it's gonna do it in its own way, right?
Using the real food is such a valuable thing as well, because as you say, like when you make it yourself, like you can make it to your personal preferences, whether that's sweet or that's salty, because some people don't
Yeah,
really like sweet stuff, other people don't like really salty stuff, and then also ingredients that support your preferences. So some people, I have a lot of people who don't tolerate wheat, don't tolerate gluten. Well, they're not necessarily celiac, but a lot of products might be wheat based, and then that limits or puts the price up so much of what products that they are able to purchase. And I think those sports nutrition products, they have a time and a place, but when you're fueling well, if you're aiming for 50, 60, 70, 80 grams of carbs an hour, depending on what the context of that training is, and you're out for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, like that's a lot of energy and a lot of food. And it doesn't have to be so crazy. It can be a sandwich, it can be a piece of cake, it can be a biscuit or a muesli bar. And when you make it yourself, you know what's in it, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to eat that cookie or
yeah,
biscuit or bar or
yeah,
slice.
yeah. Well, I think those companies do a great job at marketing. Let's just be like
Yeah.
totally, yeah, straight. Like, it's good stuff. Like, for sure it works. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not the world's most amazing stuff if you think of like making your own thing. But going
Mm.
back to your point too about, someone who is maybe gluten intolerant.
Mm.
Well, I think back to also another ride I had where we did have someone who was gluten intolerant, and he was very, very much tuned into his nutrition, and we were doing like a 5, 6 hour ride on this big loop, and I really made an emphasis with the guys, like, stay on top of the nutrition. Like, because,
Mm.
like the last 2 hours for someone could just be hell if they don't look after
Yeah.
this, right? And the rest of the group is peeling away and they can't hold the wheel or whatever.
Mm.
And so he's very much staying on the nutrition. But I'm watching it and I'm thinking, like, that day might have cost him $50 or $60 in
Yeah.
these products.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Oh,
so
easily.
we make these bars for our groups of riders. So they
Yeah.
are all equipped with like 3 or 4 big bars.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at each one of those bars as maybe $2, one or
Yeah.
$2, right? And so it's like that day cost them, or whatever, like would have cost them with your own food, like maybe $8 compared to like
Yeah.
$50 or $60. It's just like, it's kind of crazy how that's become. I never used to think of that, but that
Yeah, and
is a
I've seen that
reality.
price put people off because, I mean, sometimes like most people have had an emergency gel in their back
Yeah.
pocket at some
Yeah.
point, and it's traveled all the way around the countryside for them. And sometimes the holdback from actually using it is because they don't actually like it, or it doesn't
Yeah.
make them feel good, but they don't realize what they've never actually sort of actually thought about it. And for other situations, it's the I don't really need it. I can get away with it. And because you know that cost you $5, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll save it for race day. And I bet most people listening to this probably could go into their race nutrition cupboard and find at least 2 or 3 gels. I mean, I know I can, gels or products that are probably out of date, maybe even by like 6 or 12 months, because you've been saving it for the perfect
Yeah.
moment when it's really important versus actually using it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I still have a Morton gel from the BC Epic. So it's actually been through 2 bike packing races. So
Yeah.
like a total of like 1,800 kilometers in very rough condition. It is like, I don't know why I still
It's
have it.
battered.
It's like, it has no more of the printing or the color on it. It's just like this
Yeah.
silver
You just
bag
know what it
of
is.
goop. Yeah. And I'm like, what am I keeping that for? It's like, oh, it's my safety
Yeah.
gel.
I opened a pack of like, I think it was like scratch chews on a ride. And I was like
Yep.
running out the door, like quick grab something. And I opened them, I'm like, they're probably out of date because they're all like melted and
Oh yeah.
smushed, or they've been probably on so many different rides. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's sugar, it's just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's funny. We're still running camps now, obviously.
Yeah, so like I said, I had this big project. We live out in the mountains in British Columbia in the Kootenay Range, and it's quite a special part of the world. It's quite wild still, and what's cool is on our back property, Great Northern Rail Trail runs through here. It's just like this gravel path that connects our valley together, and it's like over 60K, but it accesses all of these other logging roads and forest servicey roads, which then you can do big loops, and there's just big mountains here and really awesome scenery, and it's hard riding, but it's really satisfying because you get up into these amazing places. And on our property we have our house, but then also like a big cabin that I've totally rebuilt and redone, and so people come and stay. So we got that up and running this summer, and it's been a really good time, like getting people out and showing them this part of the world. And I really enjoy that side of things. And then as well, people come here for training. People, like, I coach people, and so they can come and stay. And my friend Steve Neal comes and we'll do some testing and that kind of thing. So if people are really serious getting into like the racing season, we can kind of coordinate all that stuff. It's been a really fun process because I like that. It's one thing if you're just coaching someone online and you're kind of having these chats here and there, and kind of you're immersed in their life. But when you have someone there and you're riding with them for like, you see the highs and lows of what people go through, and you get a real kind of feel for their character and who they are, right? It's one thing, we can all put on a show for a while, but when you get someone who's at the end of the rope on a really long day and things aren't going well, it's like those are the real moments where you can really kind of delve into the character, but also learn a lot together, right? Like, talk about what went sideways, and sometimes it might not be a nutrition thing, it might be just a mental thing, and so there's a lot to be learned through that, and I enjoy that process. But also just getting people out into awesome places has always been something that I really enjoy a lot.
I remember when we did the camp in Besaloo, which, as I said before, like, there was a cycling camp with no cycling. We're in this beautiful, I guess, villa on the side of a mountain, and we went. I remember the hike that we did one of those days, and we were talking about how we can do all these exercises and activities that help with our physical cardiovascular fitness, but we can include our families, we can include our partners, kids, rather than just being really focused only cycling. And I remember hiking up this mountain and everyone's out of breath and sweating, and then you've got these amazing views and you get that high from being out in nature. Certainly, I think it's very important for us to all get outside more, at least it is for me.
Yeah, well, I think that it's so important. I think to a few people I've worked with where, they're in their late 50s, they have family, and, they've been working with a coach who says like, oh no, you don't do anything else but cycling. And I'm just like,
You need
okay,
a
what?
coach.
So are you doing the Tour de France, or like, because even with the Tour de France, I can't really accept that, right? You still need to be a human. You still have to like do other things. And I think you also have to respect your body in the sense of like doing load bearing things. Like cycling's a phenomenal sport.
Yeah.
We can do it well into like our, our senior years, and it's awesome in so many
And
ways.
learning to listen to your body is a huge part. I remember I had a coach a couple of, I think this was just pre-COVID, or I was training I was going to do the Trans-Pyrenees before COVID sort of put a spanner in the
Oh yeah.
works for that. And it would have been about the time I was writing my thesis, or trying to write my thesis and I knew physically, because I did an overtraining study a few years ago where I was a research participant where I was overtrained on purpose, and it took me 6 months after that to get back on the bike, to even want to get back on the bike.
Wow. Yeah.
And not to mention all the physiological stuff that it messed up. But because I knew that feeling of like, this is on the limit. I remember a coach being like, no, you have to do this sprint session, you have to do these hills. And I was like, I think I really just need to do like an hour of easy. And he's like, no, you need to do it. And it's like, okay, you're the boss, you're the coach, you know better than me. And I did it. And then basically had to take a month off training because
Yeah.
it was just that little bit too much that pushed me over the edge. Because I think stress, it's not just the physical stress from the training, it's the work, it's the lifestyle. For COVID, I think COVID was a period of time where a lot of people realized and reassessed that their lifestyles of what they wanted to be doing, and
Yeah.
started making these changes, and being aware of it and listening to it rather than like pushing ourselves through and battling on and then having to suffer later down the track is a huge learning for most people, I think.
Totally. I that's something I would love to talk about, because that's something I see all the time and my goal, I always tell people when I start working with them, my goal is for them to learn these cues, these things.
Yeah.
I always, like an example is, as pro riders, we always had a coach, and you always had someone kind of giving you a program, but that program was written couple of weeks ago or a week ago. Like, we were lucky because we had people that were very much into our lives, and it's even crazier now. Like, the coach will know every metric, and it's kind of next level stuff. But what I'm saying is, I see people who I've worked with where they would just get the plan for the month,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, it doesn't work like that for me.
Yeah.
And what I remember is like guys who were I'd be around or training with, back in the day. They're clearly sick. They look like hell that morning. It's pissing rain and 7 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And they got 6 hours, just like, what you're saying, your coach. But like, even then you were talking with your coach and he was telling you this or whatever.
Yeah.
These guys aren't even talking with the coach. They're just like, yeah, I got to get out there, and it's like this, again, going back to that hard men's mentality. Yeah, you got to do hard things, but you also got to think about the long-term view here. Is this helping the long-term? This is maybe going to make you mentally tougher. Okay. But your body's going to pay for it, right? For how long?
What's the cost?
You're going to drive bronchitis into you. So just so you can get this session in and kind of be a tough guy.
Yeah.
And so I'd watch that kind of stuff and like, this doesn't make sense. And then, throughout my career, I would just make the call, like, no, not today. And I didn't care what the team thought or what my coach. I cared about my future.
Yeah.
They just care about my performance or results or whatever, right? I know what they're trying to do, and that's fine. That's their job.
But no one knows your body like you do.
Yeah. And so what I want people is to get switched on to that, right? Learn what is that feeling. And it's hard because people want to be told what to do. They think you have the magic recipe, but it's not the case. Like, the goal is that you're able to just make the call, like, hey, I didn't do that session because kid was up all night with being sick or whatever, and then work had me in early. Like, hey, that's what I want to hear. That's not the time to do it.
I'm very much the same. Like, I talk to people about like making intentional choices, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, give me a meal plan. I'm like, well, it's a waste of time, because there's so many factors that can influence what that perfect meal plan looks like. And I talk to people how I essentially try and work my way out of job, that I don't want people to be like, what can I eat this? Can I eat this? Can I eat this? It's like, no, I want you to like like learn, like, and that's I'm there teaching and coaching people about, okay, what's going on with your body? Let's learn how your body works, what you need, so that you can then make that strategic, intentional choice of, all right, I'm going out for this 6-hour bike ride, but now, I was going to go on a 6-hour bike ride, and now I'm going out for a 2-hour bike ride. I'm doing a sprint session versus I'm going on a bikepacking trip. Like, all right, what do I need to feel for that, and how do I adapt it? And then
Depends.
it's more like the dividing. It depends. Yes, I know it's frustrating, but it does. And like, I could give you 10 different answers. You could eat 10 bananas. You could eat 10 muesli bars. You could eat this. You could eat a sandwich. You could eat a gel. You could eat a drink, and all those could be perfectly fine. But when you put it into practice and you test and experiment, you start to figure out, like, all right, that was awesome. Hate that. Never want to do that again. But even throughout your career and like throughout your training sort of journey, and or even the season, it can evolve. Like, I've noticed myself lately, I've been relying a lot more on the drink mixes and like Haribo, of like sweets, lollies, just purely because I haven't actually wanted to eat solid food, where in the past it would be all solid food. So whether that's in a state of my fitness, I'm not fit enough and I'm riding with people that are a lot stronger than me and I'm just hanging on for dear life, that's probably more the case. But I know that it comes in waves, and there'll be times that I go back into more real food. So it's learning and testing and experimenting and understanding what your body likes, how you like fueling, and what works around your lifestyle.
Totally. So I have a question for you, and this kind of revolves around this whole distraction of social media. So like you, I want people to learn for themselves when it comes to nutrition. But do you find like that you'll get them on like a good path, and then they'll be influenced by something else, and then they'll come back and say, well, I saw this, and like there's just so much crap out there that it's hard to keep people on point. Right? Do you find that with
100%. I mean, like with Instagram, I find the average person is following me on Instagram for probably 3-5 years before they are willing to invest, and they'll DIY and wing it and be like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, I can fix this in like 3 months. Like help you sort this out very, very quickly. But it's a lot of time it's overlooking those boring basics of it's like, I mean, for me, I talk about like everyday nutrition plus training nutrition plus race nutrition. They're all related. They were like kind of like separate bubbles, but they're related. But it's like learning how that works for you and your training, whether you're doing 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours a week, and testing stuff out in training rather than like winging it on race day and not making it to the finish line or missing out on a podium spot, whatever time goal you've had. And I find that like I'll get people like, oh, like I need to take this supplement, I need to take these tablets and these powders and stuff, spending things on gadgets or the latest sort of I guess that fad, whatever's in popular and vogue at the time. I'm like, I mean, it might make negligible 0.000% difference, but if you work on the timing around training, like you work on your quality nutrition, but especially the timing before, during, and after, they're very, very simple things to change. But it's the resistance for that, because people are so fixated. I mean, my research for my PhD, the biggest thing I found people weren't feeling in training is fear of gaining weight, and it's still prevalent. They're like, it's this like, oh, I don't want to gain weight. I'll get fat if I eat in training. And I find it the complete opposite, because the more we get food into training, the more before, during, and after, the rest of the day just normalizes. And so versus that, like, I'm addicted to sugar, I need to quit sugar, I need to quit this, I need to quit that. Like, I see it all the time. Like, the more restrictive you are, the more likely you are to rebound and to put it on the like secret eating or binge eat or have cheat days and then blow it all up by eating significantly more than if you incorporate it intentionally. And that's where, for me, it's that whole like learning to make strategic, smart choices. And if you're going on holidays in Italy, eat the pasta, enjoy the pasta. It doesn't mean you have to eat 5 bowls of it just because this is the one time of the year that you're eating pasta, but like eat and like a normal portion, enjoy it, go for a walk, be active in a different way. And then chances, like most of the time, you'll find that you come back and you're like, oh, my weight was like 200 grams different. I'm like, that's stable. 200 to 500 grams, that's, in my mind, that's stable, because that'll fluctuate on a day-by-day basis from fluid and how much you ate or whatever. But it's probably my biggest battle is convincing people to try the simplest of things. And you said it yourself about nutrition being a game changer, and it really is. And I'll probably die on that hill of how carbs and performance, it's not about being high carb, it's not about being low carb, but being smart with your carbs to fuel the intensity, the timing, the duration, the context, and playing around with that and learning how your body works, how you feel best. But it all starts with just trying something new and pushing us out of your comfort zone sometimes.
It's breaking that whole thing of, like, I think of my parents' generation, how they were, kind of brought up in this like butter is bad and like margarine is good kind of scenario. And it's,
which I'm sure is
my
probably
mom,
another 5 years before we get that again.
Yeah, it's all cyclical for sure. And I watch my mom, like, she's very switched on to nutrition, and we talk all the time, but yet it's still hard for her to break that.
Yeah.
It's ingrained in, right? And it's just like you said, though. And one thing I wanted to actually talk to about, or if you've ever delved into any research about this, but that whole connection. So like cyclists and athletes, type A type people have this tendency to be like all in or all out. I've seen it in a lot of my teammates where no drinking, and then like 20 beers when the pressure's off, right? And it's like, well, I don't know, like, is that better?
Well, that's what I see historically is usually resulted in the like being really lean off season and then the gaining the 10 kilos, and then you've got like 2 weeks to lose it. Stress. The more from that restriction. Where I had a conversation with another pro cyclist a week or so ago, who they were like, "This is the most relaxed I've ever going into an off season period because I'm not worried about gaining weight because I've been incorporating some of these foods that have been previously on the forbidden list for the last 5-10 years, and I'm not worried because I'm not the training food. That's the difference. So I'm not adding that extra training food. I just go back to my everyday diet. And for me, a lot of the work that I do with people is I talk about it sort of being like food psychology, in a sense that it's all the stuff going on behind the scenes about the food. It's not the food itself. Like it's rarely the food that's the problem. It's the stress. It's the argument you had with your partner, or the kids like hyping you up, or like you didn't sleep, or like all these factors that are going on in our environment that are affecting our food choices. And it's becoming aware of how that influences our food choices. So then, with I guess the framework that I teach people, it's going through like, okay, let's just get honest with what's going on right now. Because with people when I work with them, I get them to do a food diary, and people, I think a lot of times people assume like I'm going to be like, oh, can't believe you ate that, like you ate a cookie, you ate ice cream, you had a Coke, oh my goodness. I'm like shame and judgment and fear around food doesn't lead to good food choices. No. And we all have days and times where like maybe we just eat chips and chocolate for dinner, and the difference is like, is that happening once a year, once every couple of months, or is it happening like every weekend, every week? And what's going on behind the scenes of that? And so how can we incorporate some of those foods in a way that it like for some people it may be like elimination from the house. Like again, there's so many different tools in the toolbox that you can use to find, and this is where part of it is, it's not a one fix. Like you have one session with a dietitian and it's like, here's your plan. It's trial and error. And like, I have an athlete that I'm working with at the moment, and I've worked with for a couple of years, and female athlete, and they really, really battle with, they need to eat at least 3,500 calories a day to maintain weight. And they really, and this is without exercise, and they really struggle with that because there's that social norm of like, oh, if you're having more than 2,000 calories, it's too much, or more than 200 grams of carbs is too much. And the thing is, the evidence in the research shows us that men and women, if they're doing these big rides, like they might be needing 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calories, but the difference is we get it in the training around before, during, and after. It supports your quality, your recovery, performance, and then magically the rest of the day just sorts itself out because you're not hungry.
Well, I always used to say that, like, you do the work, eat enough, and your body will sort it out. But if you're trying to do all this wacky stuff, control and restrain and restrict and all that stuff, and I think that's what I wanted to touch on before, is like, I think with that comes like a certain amount of cortisol stress, which
for sure,
puts you in this kind of, the fight or flight type of scenario.
sustainable.
And your body's
you probably saw that when you're doing
sugar.
keto, like You probably
Oh
saw that
yeah.
when you're doing keto. Like, and that's the first
Yeah.
example I can think of. I've been around, I remember a camp I did when I was doing triathlon, and there was one guy on a triathlete during keto. Like, you could smell his breath from meters away because of the ketones, but it was so socially challenging and difficult for
Yeah.
him because
Yeah.
firstly, he wouldn't eat any of the foods anyone else was eating on the camp, but then he was getting dropped in every single ride. And so it creates this stress for him because he's like getting dropped in every ride. And
Yeah.
he's like, I mean, he looks great. He's ripped. So
Shredded.
again, it's one of those things
Yeah.
like, what is it about? Is it aesthetics or is it performance?
Yeah.
Because aesthetics doesn't equal performance. And someone can
No.
be extremely ripped and extremely lean, but have nothing when it comes to sort of
Absolutely.
power.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like that social stress of the more restrictive someone's diet is, the
Well,
more
you
isolated
cancel
they
yourself
become.
out of any meal
Yeah,
with anyone, right? Like you're
yeah, and
not enjoying anything.
no, and then food is so much more than, I talk a lot about how it's more than just the numbers. Like, yeah, the numbers have the place, but it's not a nutrition is an art and a science. It's not a case of like you eat exactly this amount and then you'll gain weight, you'll lose weight. Like, it depends. Like, there's so many other factors that influence that. And so that's where it's like, let's test it out. Like, tweak, adjust, tweak, adjust, tweak,
Yeah.
adjust. And it's learning how your body works. And if you've got stress in your body, then that's going to influence how your body's metabolism is going on. If you've got a very restrictive diet, that's going to affect your metabolism because your gut microbiota. Like, there's so much more we're learning about, and this is where my nutrition nerd stuff comes out, because yeah, there's the basic macronutrients, but then there's so much more than that. But getting the basics right is the first thing that, when
Yeah.
you get those basics right, like, a lot of the other stuff just falls into place.
Totally. And I think, it's so important to just touch again on what you said earlier with people buying gimmicks and
Yeah.
things for their bikes and their aero socks and the amount of money they can spend on that stuff. I just shake my head.
Yeah.
It's like, focus on the stuff that actually moves the needle right now. Hey, if you make it to the top in your thing, sure. Like, I don't care if people want to spend money on that stuff. That's great. Supports the cycling industry. It's awesome, whatever. But like, don't neglect things that actually move the needle, because let's not think aero socks are going to make you any faster anywhere you go.
Because everyone
right?
else is going to have the aero socks as well.
Exactly. It's just like, I watch like, someone who's maybe carrying an extra 10, 15 pounds will spend 10 grand on a set of lightweight wheels or whatever they cost now. I don't know. It's probably a lot more than that. And you're like, that's cool, but it doesn't really make you faster in the sense, like, if you're not doing the other work. And we touched on that earlier. It's like the actual hard work, or the things that move the needle the most. They're not sexy. They're not cool. They're not what's on Instagram. They're not what social media is selling you right now.
And they're not overnight.
Yeah,
that's the thing. They're not.
exactly.
It's not a pill.
That wheel's overnight.
It's
though.
not.
You can get it sent to you, like.
Yeah,
and that's what we're up against.
I find, like, nutrition, like, it can take like 2 or 3 weeks of people being consistent with a change to see a difference, and people can be so derailed by things like that, very unreliable, like weight on the scale. Like, your weight is like so like up down up down up down up down, and like, you're flying overseas. Like, I've seen athletes who their weight goes up by 2 kilos when they do these long haul flights, and then they're stressing and then they're restricting because of that. Whereas again, this is like using data to support you, and using data like, okay, I've gone on the scales, I know I've just gone on a flight, my weight will be higher today, breathe, it's just water, it's just fluid. Tomorrow, 2 days later, it'll be down. So for some people, their strategy is don't get on the scales those days, and other people, they're aware of that and they can self-soothe and calm themselves down and use that data to remind themselves, like, okay, I didn't gain 2 kilos of fat on the plane, like, it's okay. But it's like, this is, I mean, I find uncovering all these food rules and these food boards, like, the more I work with people, the more I see them coming out, and helping them to see them and to find strategies that will work through them to continue making, because again, it's not about being perfect, but it's making smart, intentional choices with your training, with your food, with your exercise, how you're living your life, that you live the best life and live a life that you then don't regret on. And I mean, I had a conversation with an athlete today who was like, do you know, like, I had something that made me realize that life is too short to not enjoy eating a piece of cake. And I'm like, this is great. Like I'm feeling so happy. I can go out for cake with my friends on the odd occasion. Whereas in the
Yeah.
past, they would never touch it because it's bad and it's got sugar in it. But
Yeah.
they've realized, like, well, life is short and let's live a life of intention and be smart. It doesn't mean only eat cake, but it's like, okay, there's a time and a place where I'm going to enjoy it. And there's a time and a place I'm like, nah, I don't want that cake. It doesn't suit me today. And I'm happy to leave it.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of like just like that flying thing and like this delayed response of the body and
Yeah.
then all of this data collection we have as far as like athletes can tap into now, these wearables and these devices. I'm sure you've probably seen it as well, but like how, they're cool because you can track data, you can track trends, and you can see things kind of, HRV is an interesting one. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there, but I think what I've noticed, and just going back to like the weight scale, is like obsessing about that, focusing on those things. I've seen them become also a big stressor in people's lives, right? Like I'll get a message in the morning, like my HRV is this, and I've got to do this. And I'm just like, okay, how do you feel? Well, I actually feel pretty good. And I'm like, okay, well,
I remember
let's
like
not
that
worry about that
tuning
stuff.
in.
Like,
Yeah, because like sometimes I remember with training, like again, I haven't been training in ages because I haven't had a goal or something specifically that I've wanted to train in. I want to be fast, I want to ride well, and I want to be able to like just pick up the bike and go. This weekend I'm probably going to do like 300 kilometers this weekend over like 2-3 days, and so it's going to be a big weekend. But I know that by fueling it, I'll survive. But the using those cues and the data to like support you, because there's days that I've woken up and like even earlier this week, I was planning to go for a ride on Tuesday with some friends, and I woke up and it was raining, and I'm like, I don't want to ride on the roads when it's wet. It's too dangerous. It's like an ice rink. I was like, I'm going to put a pause on the ride today. And also, I wasn't feeling 100%. I went back to bed. I woke up 3 hours later. I'm like, oh, I obviously needed sleep. Like that never happens. And learning to allow that and to tune into that versus like, no, I must go for a ride. Which I've done in the past. And I remember a trick that a coach or someone had told me years ago was like, okay, if you're not feeling super motivated to go out for a ride, just like get out the door and give it 30 minutes. Because sometimes it's like getting out the door is the hardest part. And once you're out the door, you're like, this is amazing. I'm so happy.
Totally.
Like, why would I ever not want to do this? And there'll be other days that you're like, this is horrible. Like, this sucks. Whose idea was this? And again, like you can use that mood as a factor of like what's going on in your body. And it could be stress, it could be sleep, it could be food. There's a lot of different factors going on. But yeah, like for yourself, is it? I mean, there's very few athletes or people that train at this sort of like A-type level that are what I would consider like lazy or unmotivated. It's rarely 100%. Lack of motivation from most people will do the training and push themselves above and beyond. So sometimes that cue of like, I don't really want to train. Like, oh, what's going on there? Like there might be something going on behind the scenes. There might be a reason for that. Like don't ignore it. Like listen to your body, learn what's going on, and take inspired action from that.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
Before we wrap up, your book is planning to come out later this year, I believe.
Yeah, we're shooting. It's being published in the UK actually, and the book is called We Will Never Be Here Again. And we had a Kickstarter thing to get it going. I'm not really up on the Kickstarter stuff, but it seemed to work pretty well. And so, everything's going forward, and we're trying to figure out distributorship here in North America. It'll be pretty easy to access in Europe. But it's the story of my life. Before cycling, I did a lot of different things, and I started racing very late. I was 25 years old when I first started racing. So I lived a lot of life prior to that, which I think helped me a lot to see things differently than a lot of my colleagues maybe. But the goal is to have it around Christmas time, and check it out. We have it on Kickstarter. You can still purchase through there, and then there will be more information, I guess, on my Instagram when that becomes more available in different ways.
I'll give a link in the show notes to your Instagram page and also your website for your camps if anyone is interested in getting involved with one of your camps.
Cool.
Before we wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
I think we touched on a lot of stuff, but it kind of keeps coming back to me is like focus on the things that can actually move the needle, that take time, and realize it's going to take time. Let go of this thing that things are going to happen overnight or in a week or whatever. bodies don't change that quick. If it's for aesthetics, it's going to take some time. If it's for performance, it's going to take time. And I always think of like this stuff that's being sold, this high intensity all the time kind of workouts. Okay, if you're time crunched and you just want to plateau at a certain fitness level, it's fine. It's good. You're doing something. But if you're actually looking for performance in endurance-based sports and all that stuff, it just takes work, and it takes a lot of time. And zone 2, it takes a lot of volume. There's no tricks around that, and it's the same with nutrition. There's no tricks, right? Like if you're thinking you're going to exercise to lose weight, it's part of the puzzle. But the biggest piece is actually eating healthily, eating clean, and not getting too stressed out about that. Like I think that 80-20 rule is actually something that I try and apply in my life, is that stay clean, stay simple, because also we complicate the hell out of this stuff too. And I don't think it needs to be, right? Eat things that don't come in packages is general rule around my house as much as possible. And then, the odd time when you're out or traveling or whatever, enjoy what there is within reason. Like you said, it's not 5 bowls at fast. It's like enjoy that specialty thing of that region.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time, stay on it, stay dedicated, and know that it's going to take time. And if you do the work, the body sorts it out. But if you're always stressed and have a weird connection to it, and you're doing this yo-yo kind of relationship to diet and training and stress, it's like, I'm sorry, but it's not going to work. Yeah. So if you have a more balanced, simple approach and kind of let go of the stress, and letting go is like the key word there, because we just hang on to this stuff for no reason. It's never helped us in the past, right? I look at most people that are stressing out crazily about all of these different things they can't control. I think that's kind of the big thing. It just takes time and consistency and discipline. And I find most people don't have an issue with the discipline. It's just confusing out there. There's just so much mixed messages. There's so much information, and a lot of it's bullshit, right? It's rare that we have something that comes through that you're like, that's the final word on this, next year it's the worst thing for you, the worst food for you. It does all these horrible things. It's like, well, no, it's just food, Yeah, superfood or not, it's like we need food. And so just try and eat real stuff and don't stress about it.
Yeah,
eat till you're full, and try not to eat all the time. And that's kind of what I would say.
Good advice. Yeah, good philosophy. And thank you very much for sharing that. So hopefully everyone that's been listening has taken some really good insight and things to consider and to apply to their sort of lifestyle. But thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciated having the chat and catching up. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Well, that's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I will see you next time.